And good morning once again, and welcome back to Open Your Eyes on this beautiful Wednesday morning. We are about to jump on into our first segment, and definitely a conversation we are looking forward to, Social Security Board and contribution reform. Now, in with us to tell us all about what's going on is Dr. Colin Young, who is the CEO of Social Security Board, and Chandra Nisbet Cansino. I like to say that name, by the way. General Manager of Corporate Customer Relations Services. Guys, good morning and welcome. It's so nice to have you in.
Good morning and thanks for having us.
Good morning.
Jumping into it, we've got a few minutes to discuss this. One of the things we've seen so far over the past, actually over yesterday, whereby social media has been flooding with a lot of information and rumors here, there, everywhere. But we're glad that you're in to actually clear that up. I think first and foremost for me is that in order for us to understand how we get things, how things are being done, we must understand the services and why we have certain things. So Social Security, what is Social Security and what it is about? How is it essential to our lives?
Good morning and good morning to the listening and viewing public. We're delighted to be here and hopefully we can provide some clarifications on some of the issues being discussed. First off, in terms of what is Social Security, it's a social insurance program. And perhaps I can draw an analogy with insurance.
Sure.
Right? What we do by law is that we insure a certain portion of your earnings for the week. And the contributions you pay each week is the premium for that insurance that you're getting on your salary. The salary ranges that we currently insure goes from about $70 and under a week up to the current, what we call the ceiling, $320 a week. That portion of insurance is split between the employers and the employees. And that's what people pay every week. Now, in return for that payment, people are entitled to certain benefits. And we call these short-term benefits and long-term benefits. But what that means is that short-terms are things like sickness benefits when you're sick. And so if we insure $320 of your salary, the law says that when you are sick, we pay you 80% of that, which is $256, right? Maternity benefits, same thing. We also insure persons for employment injury. So if they get hurt on the job, Social Security will pay the medical costs, including the medical care for that person, as well as a portion of your replacement income. And then, of course, the long-term benefits that you get are your pensions that you get after you've paid into the fund for at least 10 years of contributions. So all of it's an insurance program that you pay, that your payment accumulates towards your pension, but in the meantime, you qualify for short-term benefits. Your benefits are indexed to how much you pay. So if you pay a small amount, then your benefits are obviously going to be smaller. If you pay a higher amount, your benefits are higher. And so that's what it is. It's an insurance program that is mandatory by law, that is intended to ensure that there is a sector of the population that will not be in poverty in the event that they lose employment and so on because of the sickness benefit.
All right.
Now, thank you for that explanation in just how it works. We were chatting before we started, and I think one of the fundamental issues is that there's a natural reaction from workers across the country. I think we are in a position where people feel that they can't let go another dime out of their paychecks to be able, because they need to survive. And so there are a lot of questions that people have, whether this is necessary, why now? And that's where I want to start in talking about whether the situation was foreseen, how long ago it was foreseen. So how did we get here?
We got here because, by the way Social Security systems are set up, they're defined benefit systems that pay as you go. When a fund is initially set up, everybody is paying in, but nobody is getting a pension because you have to make 500 contributions before you can qualify for a pension. So you're accumulating assets relatively fast in the beginning. But once the fund starts to get mature enough, then all of the original entry persons are now reaching retirement age and they're coming out of the fund, and we're obliged to pay them a retirement pension. So every social security system, including in the United States of America, all of the ones in the Caribbean, every so often, about 10 to 12 years, have to change the contributions to go into the fund because what's being paid out is greater than what's coming in. In our situation, the last SSB is 38 years old. Okay. And so from 1981 to 2001, there were no changes to the contribution schedule. And then in 2003, there was an increase of 1% rate. The actuary, it has been saying to SSB and the government of Belize for over a decade that this time will come, and that what we have to do is to increase the contributions to ensure that we don't go over the proverbial financial cliff. So yes, Marlene, there has been the writing on the wall for over a decade. The issue why nothing was done until now is because it's always a political issue, right? It's always a political issue. No administration wants to be the one that would increase the contributions of workers and employers. However, if we don't do anything, then what happens is the very sustainability of the fund is then threatened. Yeah. So one of the things we want to be able to very clearly show workers is that while it is difficult for persons to pay an extra amount into the fund, don't think of it as a tax, but think of it as an investment in your retirement as well as your sickness benefit. For a lot of persons who work outside of unions environments, the labor law guarantees you your full salary for the first 16 days of work. Whatever Social Security pays you for those first 16 days, the employer has to pay the difference so that you get your full salary. On day 17, however, those workers, the only money they would get is from Social Security, right? So if you're sick for more than 16 days, the only income you will have is SSB's income. So that provides you with a replacement of your income during the period of being sick. The other portion of it is clearly a retirement pension. For those of us who are near retirement, some of them have not saved. And the only retirement income that they will get that is mandated by law is the return on their investment at SSB. SSB was never designed to be your sole retirement plan, however, right? But for many of us, we don't save for retirement. If it wasn't for the return that you get from Social Security as your pension, those persons will become vulnerable to going into poverty. So we want to change the narrative to say to persons, yes, you're paying into the fund, but you will get that money back, and you'll get it back with a lot more than what you put in.
But going back to the question about how we got here, as you've said, the writing has been on the wall for quite a while. You have spoken of doing consultations across the country for, I believe, 2 years?
Yes.
Who did you speak to, and what was the feedback?
Well, and Chandra can jump in here as well, but Chandra first started going around the country speaking to the private sector as well as the general public. Yeah. And maybe you want to, she started essentially the first national tour.
In 2017.
Okay.
Well, the end of 2016 into 2017, and we had public consultations. We invited the general public on our advertisement. At that time, we didn't have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook page now, and so we had open forums for anybody that wanted to attend the sessions. Some of the sessions were well attended and some of them were not. And that was the process of information sharing. That was when we said, this is what has to be done. These changes are now imperative and we need to decide on the way forward. Then when Dr. Young joined the team, we kind of refocused our conversations, and we started to discuss with the organized groups, such as the unions, the Chamber of Commerce, the Belize Business Bureau, all of who have representatives on the board as well. And then then Dr. Young can explain the dynamics of what happened at the point when we said, well, this is what we need. The actuary says we need to increase the contribution rate by 2%, and we need to increase the wage bands up to 500. And then the Chamber and Union said, well, we understand, but no way are we going to accept an increase of that magnitude all in one. And so the discussion started about what would be the best way going forward, and that is when we came up with the proposal in discussion with them for a phased-in approach.
In addition to that, we went to all over the country, and we spoke to from the cane farmers associations to the BNTU annual general meetings, to Rotary clubs throughout the country. The Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry held mixers that was well attended by hundreds of employers. The same thing with the BBB. So we've been talking to everybody who wants to talk to us.
And the message was that you need to increase contributions.
That we absolutely have to increase because of where we are. One, because contributions has been frozen for so long, and that the amount of revenue that we collect from contributions relative to our expenditure has been in a deficit since 2014. So what we've had to do is to take a greater portion of the investment income we earn to apply to operations to meet our costs. Well, there's only so much investment income you have. And after you've arrived at taking 100% of your investment income, then clearly you'll have to then liquidate your investments. To put that simply, if I have $1,000 in my credit union account, and that pays me 5%, right? And if I have to take all of that 5% each time I get my dividend, then clearly my amount of money in the bank stays the same. But if I have to now take $100 out of that 1,000 plus the 5%, then clearly my 1,000 decreases, right? And that's where we are in terms of the fund, because we are the only fund in the region that has not touched its contribution schedule for 16, 17 years.
So the results of your consultations, what I'm hearing from you is that there was opposition to a full rollout of the increase, but acknowledgement that there needed to be an increase.
Yes. In fact,
and was this quantum what was presented to them?
Yes, so what we did, because on the advice of the actuary, is to say, look, we needed to go from 8% to 10%, and we needed to go from 320 to 520. When we went to the organized groups, the chamber, for example, was saying, look, we understand that Social Security is in a dire financial situation, but it is untenable to come after 17 years and now expect us to absorb all of this cost. Because if you look at the contribution schedule, the employers do pay a greater portion of the weekly contribution for everybody, right? So the union said, well, we agree to it, but we don't want to pay anymore. We want to keep the same split that we have. So we were able to demonstrate to the chamber and the business sector that the chamber also said we don't want any increases in rates, right? That's so we were able to demonstrate to them that what they're proposing would not work. In fact, it would worsen the fund. And so we had to go back, and we eventually came up with what we are proposing now, which is called the scenario 1 or half one proposal. 0.5% increase this year, 0.5% next year, 1% in 2021. And the same thing we're phasing in the ceiling. Again, the ceiling is the amount of the money from your salary that we insure, and then we pay sickness benefit and short-term benefits that is 80% of that amount.
So what we're getting here as well, at least for me, is that this was no big news. Everybody knew. They were supposed to know it, being that we did some of these town halls so that the entire public would know. At what point are we going to, for employees, are they going to start to feel this? Is it something that is going to happen at the next pay period, which is probably tomorrow?
No.
Or is it something that's coming up in a few months or a year?
The implementation date that was approved by the cabinet is July 1st. And Social Security payments are essentially paid, depending on how often you get paid, bi-weekly or weekly or monthly, for a month back. right? So generally, for most persons, what will happen is your employers will pay your July contribution in August, right? Because you've worked those weeks. So that is when workers will start to see an increase deduction from their salaries, and where employers will have to be paying a little bit more for their salaries. As it relates to the benefits, that will become, they will start to see if persons get sick after the first week of paying the new rates, they will see a higher sickness benefit. And then, because the way that works is that we take your last 13 weeks of contributions and we average that. And then that's your payment.
And I want to come back to the benefits and any potential changes there. But what is important in this conversation is that I think the reaction by people is that what we hear of Social Security is oftentimes their investments and their loans. And you know that the history of Social Security boards, investment choices and loan choices have been mired in controversy. Oftentimes seen as a very strange or perhaps too close relationship with the government itself. And so the question people have is if we have entrusted this money to the Social Security Board and they're to make wise investments in our benefits so we don't end up in a situation where we have to contribute more. That's the question people really have today.
And that is a very good question, and they ought to be asking that question, because Social Security money is the people's money, and it should be treated with the utmost amount of judiciousness and prudential investments. But we have not hidden away from the legacy issues that, as you rightly said, Marlene, has mired Social Security, has tarnished the reputation, tarnished the image of the institution. And we have, those are the legacy investments that led to the Senate Special Inquiry on Social Security, the Social Security Reform Commission report, things that, like the mortgage securitization program and Intelco and all of those other issues. Yeah. Those things happened. And what occurred after that process was that the legislation was revised to make it more difficult for those things to reoccur. As part of that process, the transparency increased because now the unions are part of the investment committee. The board cannot have a quorum unless the social partners are in attendance. The board cannot overturn the investment committee's decision. The board members are individually liable if they were to do something like what they did back in the legacy investment time. So from a governance point of view, changes were made. Now, the investment income that the fund earns is what has been delaying the period of equilibrium or delaying this time, because we do get good returns on the investment portfolio. In 2017, our rate of return was 5.5%. Over the last 5 years, it's almost 6%. Right? If it wasn't for that money that we were getting, we would have had to increase contributions a long time ago. Now, I think one of the greatest disservice that SSB did was not to go back to people after the whole legacy issues from the Senate Special Inquiry and the Social Security Reform, to tell people exactly how much money was lost from these investments and what was done to ensure that it never occurs again. So there's a lot of people who have in their mind, all they remember is that there was a lot of money that was being discussed, right? But the government of Belize had to pay back SSB as a result of some of the social agitation that occurred. And as a result of that, SSB recovered the majority of that money, but people weren't told. You see? Now, it meant that SSB got back most of its money, but where did government get that money from? They had to get it from taxpayers, right? They got money through taxes, and then they took and gave back SSB money that for investments that it did that it ought not to have done.
Yeah. Government's decisions and our money to our money.
Correct. Right. And then another one that took a lot of money out of the fund, as you may remember, is that the NHI scheme, the National Health Insurance Scheme, was legislated to be funded out of Social Security money. That costed the fund some $43 million, right? And then also the non-contributory program that also costed the fund about $40 million. Again, those were policy decisions by the government of the day that then led to where we are today.
But let's get a bit more clarity on your investments and loans portfolio, because what we need to know, my question is, we've heard of the more recent loans, one being with BTL, and what is important is to know whether or not the projections that were made are being met at this time.
Yes, in fact, the investments that we have in the utilities, and currently we have close to $200 million that are invested in the utilities. The rate of return on those investments has been extremely beneficial to SSB, right? In terms of, I think last year, and these are all available in our audited financial statements online, you would see that BWS, we had a return of 7.5%, BTL 6%, and BEL 9%, so in terms of the return. So these have, BEL has been especially very, very lucrative for the fund. These are equity investments, so we buy shares. And currently, we have 3 directors on the board of BEL and BTL, and for every 10% we get 1 director. So now we have social partners on the board along with government on the board. So we own 34% of BTL and 32% of BEL, which means that whatever dividend is declared, we get that percent of dividend as a return on our investment.
Okay.
So the projections, as they were first indicated, have been following through. Let's talk about the loans. How are the loans performing?
The loans are performing very well. Right now we have a loan portfolio of about $120 million. Those are loans to the private sector. And also to some parastatal, some statutory bodies. And if you look at our 2017 audited financials, you would see that our non-performing loans stood at 0.78%. Yesterday I said 0.73, but it's 0.78%, which is less than $1 million, right? So the loans, some areas we have a little difficulty, like for example in citrus, because they were hit by the citrus greening disease that impacts production. Shrimp, we also because of the disease that hits them. But generally those loans perform quite well. The issue, however, is that Belize is a very small economy. The options for investments are very narrow and very small, that are within the risk appetite of the board. You don't want to be careless with people's money. So you have to really pick the ones that are within that risk profile. The truth is, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't find things that you want to invest in that gives you these excellent returns that don't have risks. The higher the return you want, the higher the risk you have to take. And so if you don't want to take a big risk, then you're not going to get a big rate of return. And that's where we are. The banks today, essentially, they either don't want your money, or if they take your money, they're giving you a very small interest rate on that. Right now, our average that we get on our bank's deposits is about 2.15%. 10 years ago, SSB was earning 10%
From the banks.
from the banks. So if you're getting 2% and inflation is 0.5%, then your return is 1.5%, right? Now, the actuary says that if we want to remain sustainable, you need a minimum of 5% return on that investment portfolio. Over the last 10 years, we're just above 5%.
I just wanted to add quickly in regards to because a lot of the narrative on social media is Social Security is a piggy bank and they only lend to cronies, etc. But the legislation does not allow that anymore. All Social Security investment loans have to be publicized. They're advertised in the newspapers. The general public, all of those people commenting on social media have an opportunity to either agree or disagree. All of that is given, all of that time is given under the legislation. And quickly we had an example of that. I think Social Security was, really, the investment committee was recommending a loan for Santander, yes. And the
Board
general
agreed,
public,
yeah.
right. And then the general public was not in agreement with it, and the loan was not given to the group. And so I'm just saying that to say that it's really an opportunity that the public has at all times to know what we are lending, to whom we are lending, and they have a say, since, again, as CEO says, it is the people's money. So just a reminder of that procedure.
And I do agree. I mean, I think that is a clear example, but I think just to be clear, you know, the scars that the Belizean people have, not just from Social Security Board, but in many decisions that have been made in the past, I think are very healthy ones, because after you've been scarred, you should have a level of cynicism afterwards. And so, and that's why I want to pose this question specifically to you, CEO Young, because I think as the man at the helm of this organization, if you were to tell a worker right now who genuinely cannot afford to have additional money taken out of their account, what do you say to them to say this is the best decision for you, recognizing the financial strain? Because to some people, a couple extra dollars don't seem like much, but to some people it means a lot.
Yes.
What do you say as the leader of this institution to those individuals who are watching, who are scared of having to lose that extra money in every single paycheck?
What I would say to them is the benefits that you obtain from paying that extra amount of Social Security contributions is going to come back to you in a much greater amount in the future. So it is an investment, because many of us, because of this financial situation, cannot afford to be saving money. You save when you can afford to save. Social Security is essentially a mandatory savings plan that now when you reach retirement age 60 voluntarily or age 65, now SSB will pay you a retirement pension for the rest of your life. And if you have, when you die, in the case of a man and you have a wife and kids behind, they will be entitled to a survivor's pension. The wife until she remarries or she dies. The child until he or she turns 21 and in school. Right, so we showed, there were some slides yesterday where we showed you that after only, in the case of the lower end, after only 1 to 2 years, you would have collected back every single dollar you have paid into Social Security on your pension. At the high end, about 3 years, and you would have collected every single dollar that you've paid. So what you put in and what you get out, there's a big difference. So that's what I would say. It's essentially, I understand the difficulty now, but you would get back that money, and especially if you are yesterday at the press conference, Aaron Humes used the term catch and kill, you know, to say. But what happens to persons, as I said, when you get sick, after that first 16 days, if it wasn't for Social Security, you would get no income by law. But Social Security provides you with 80% of that average weekly earning that you would have had. That provides you with a little cushion until you could start to work again.
You know, just listening to how everything unfolds, it gives you a better understanding of how you're supposed to deal with Social Security and why it's there. Now, I want to get to checks and balances, and for people who owe, because there are a lot of people you'd hear, oh, they owe Social Security, and of course there's a big thing going on right now in the papers and on social media of the Belmopan City Council owing a certain sum of money. What are we doing in that perspective?
First off, they have paid.
So we're clearing that up. Belmopan City Council?
They have now paid. But in every month there are employers. So generally when people owe, it's really the employers, because most persons except for the self-employed,
They don't get a choice. They have to pay.
Yeah, but it's taken out by the employer.
Yes.
Right? And paid once a month. So generally what happens is that some employers, for whatever reason, would run behind or be late, and of which we start to charge an interest the day after. But what we are trying to say to workers and to employers is that you have to stay current with your payments. Because if your employee gets sick, in a period that you're late, it may impact their ability to get benefits. And we cannot disenfranchise the worker. Right? So what we are doing is that we've stepped up compliance efforts, meaning that our inspectors go to businesses to make sure that if they're late, that we go to them. And what we do, as I said on the media, is that the law allows us to issue an assessment. We go in, we make sure that the person was working, and then we demand the payment via, this is authority given to us under law. Once we do that, we then give the contributions that you should have paid to the employed person, and then they qualify for their benefits. So, but there might be an inconvenience initially when they come in because there are no contributions. So that's what we're doing. We are also going to soon have the ability for workers to register with Social Security online through a secure portal, and they will be able to log in and see their contribution history.
Oh, that's good.
Right? That way they can go in and to see whether their employers are paying. The biggest one that just occurred last month at the board meeting is the board took a decision that starting in July, that every employer that is 2 months or more in arrears with Social Security, their names will be published on social media and newspapers. So that way people will get a sense of
well, that way an employee isn't blindsided when they go in to seek their benefits, because they're taking the responsibility for actions that they don't have any control over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you speak of the increased benefits, and I hear it in more of the long term with the retirement benefits that come, or the pension benefits. Talk to me about other restructuring. Clearly, you're looking at sustainability of the fund itself, and getting more income. But what's the conversation in being able to ensure that the benefits that people are getting are livable?
And that's why we are doing what we're doing, because there are two things that Social Security is supposed to provide. One of them is that the payment that you get, the benefit that you get, is adequate. Right? Now, all the benefits that people are getting today, those benefits have been the same since 2001. Right? So 256 today versus 256 in 2001, clearly the purchasing power is a lot less today. But your benefits can't increase unless we insure more of your salary. And that is why under this proposal, the ceiling, the amount that we insure goes up, which means that the benefits that come from that goes up. So right now it's 80% of 320. Then in this year, it will be 80% of 440. The following year, 80% of 480. And then in 2021, 80% of 520, which is $416. Right? So that is how your benefit, and the same thing with the short-term maternity benefits and so on, those also increase. So that is what we really want people to understand, is that the adequacy of the benefit comes from when we increase the rate, the ceiling. Right? Because that tracks. Belize has one of the lowest ceilings.
And I want to explain that to people, because I think that that's part of what we don't understand until you go in for your maternity benefits or whatever benefit it is. If you are making $400, you're not insured for 80% of 400. You're insured up to that 320 cap currently.
Correct. And that's what
if I was great at math, I'd tell you what 80 of 320 is, but I'm not. But
256.
But my point is that I think that that's an important conversation to be had. So this rollout is going to be done at the same time with the increase in your contributions.
Yes.
So we're not waiting for later on. This is going to be as soon as you start with your periodic increments.
Yes.
You will also start with that periodic increase in the total amount of money that will be insured, which equates to the total amount of money you'll be able to get back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Do you want to break this down for us, Chandra?
Well, it's just it's incremental. It will be phased in, and
Yeah.
that's what makes the explanation a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
But that is what we agreed to do, and so this every year it goes up a little. So what I try to do is compare what it will be currently to what it will be in 2021, taking into consideration that there will be a small increment of increases as we go between now and 2021. So when we reach to 2021, the amount that you will be receiving for a short-term claim will go from $256 to $416. And it also applies to your pension, because we calculate your pension for the 3 best years. So if you pay at the highest rate for 3 years, after 2021, then your pension will go from $192, which is the maximum now, to approximately $312 a week after you qualify.
Which means that your annual amount goes from about almost $10,000 to $16,200 in your pension. So again, talk about the adequacy of the benefit.
Now let's talk about some of the, clearly, given the reaction that you're getting from the public, you're going to be asked to answer quite a number of questions. And I noticed that you were proactive. You streamed online so that people could see. The media was invited. You're doing your public appearances. If people still have concerns or questions, what is your remedy in being able to address this?
Well, as you know, Marlene, we've been trying to increase our presence to the general public, answering as many questions as possible, providing information, ads, etc., so that people are aware of their benefits. And so we will only continue to do that. That strategy will continue. And we invite questions via whatever channel the public so chooses. We have our Facebook page, which is very, very active. The messenger portion of that, people ask a lot of questions via that medium every day, all day long. We answer those almost instantaneously during working hours, and we'll try to improve that over the weekend. We also have, if you want to call us, if you want to write us a letter, if you want to email us, whatever medium you choose to ask a question, please feel free to do so, and we will make sure that we provide a response.
In addition to that, we are embarked, even though we had 2 years of consultations, every district, the branches will be engaging directly with employers for them to understand the changes. In fact, tomorrow at 9 o'clock at the Princess, there's going to be the Belize City Employers Forum.
Okay.
Right? There'll be one in every district.
Okay.
And in some districts, more than one. Like, for example, in Sand Creek District, there'll be one in Independence and Dangriga. In order for us to, any questions that, like yesterday, you saw the turnout, people have questions and we provide this. So we also, if businesses or employee groups organizes and they would like us to come and speak with them, we've been doing that. In fact, a lot of the engagements we've done is from that. We want to make this as available to everybody, and we have been doing this very transparently from the very beginning, because I think people ought to know about their social security system.
So the first change in contribution will be seen in August.
It depends again on your
payment
cycle, but yes, for the majority of persons,
on August 14th.
August 14th.
And you will be able to see the change in benefits as of?
Well, for sickness benefits, from the first full week after the implementation.
Okay.
Right? So meaning that if you work that week from July 1st to July 7th, and you pay that increase, because remember, it will be taken out of your salary at that time, but it wouldn't be paid in by your employer until August 14th. Then what will happen is that will be included in the average, and you will see an increased pension. Now the full increase will come after 13 full weeks, because that whole 13 weeks will have the new rates. Right?
Okay. Well, thank you for coming in and being able to explain the changes that we are expecting, and we appreciate you sharing all this information.
We just have one quick change, which I just wanted to share in regards to the payment of the claim the
Yes.
sickness benefit claims. One of the amendments, because we have other amendments, we probably have to come back, Marlene, is that we increase the time to submit a claim from 4 days to 14 days. So persons now have 14 days to submit their short-term benefit claims as opposed to 4 days because, well, when Dr. Young joined us, he said, why are we disallowing so many claims? And so we looked at it, and one of the main reasons were because they were being submitted late.
Yeah.
So what
Because
we did
they were
was,
sick.
You're right. Well, that's some of the reasons. And so we looked at that, and thankfully the board supported it, and so we have now extended the time for claiming a benefit from 4 days to 14 days, among a few other changes as well.
All right. Well, we'll have to have that extended conversation as well. But thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much,
you so
too.
much.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking to the YMCA about their upcoming summer programs. So stay tuned.